Welcome to our second week in covering the Brahmajāla Sutta, the very first of the Digha Nikaya suttas, the discourses found in the long discourses of the Buddha collection. Last week we spoke about what brought about this sutta, the surrounding circumstances. We saw how there were these two Brahmins, one a teacher, the other one his pupil, and they were discussing. The teacher was criticizing the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, while the student, the pupil of that Brahmin, was defending the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Meanwhile, both were walking behind the Sangha which was walking behind the Buddha on their way in the region of Nalanda in India. And we saw how the Buddha, the following day, came out of his rest in this area where all these recluses and ascetics had gathered for the night, and saw the bhikkhus discussing their impressions from what they saw and heard, given these two Brahmins and the teacher's criticism and the others' kind words to the Buddha and the Dhamma and the Sangha. And the Buddha clearly delineated as to what he considers to be proper, or in this case, rather mundane type of veneration, showing of respect. And he listed all three categories of sila, but sila that is, or virtuous behavior, that is of a mundane nature, because these are behaviors that are seen, evaluated, appreciated, acknowledged by the regular, ordinary person, namely the Puthujjana, which you saw how the Buddha does not care much about that, because it doesn't mean much, ultimately, to have a person do or behave a certain way, this and that, because it might look good, it might portray the person in a way that is acceptable by the general members of society, the Puthujjanas basically. But the Buddha is leading us somewhere with this progression of explanation, elucidations that we will see. So today we'll continue from well, we finished that section last week. So today we will start on to the main theme, at least the middle portion of the themes that we find in the Brahmajāla Sutta, and that is ditthi, views, specifically wrong views. Remember, the Brahmajāla Sutta is, in English, it's the all-embracing net of wrong views. Net, because beings are like fish that get caught in the fisherman's net. And in fact, it's not a net that has wide spaces. No, they're very finely weaved patterns where it doesn't allow a being to swim out so easily. So these are metaphors. The Buddha was known for his similes because he kept on insisting that there are individuals who are ready to awaken, to understand. They will need, however, in order for them to awaken, the use of similes. Intelligent people, he says, can benefit greatly through the use of similes, metaphors. He wasn't doing it to entertain us. So the wrong views that are listed, they are 62 in number. And I mentioned briefly last week that you have 18, and then you have a group of 44. One deals with the past, the other one deals with the future. Past as in where we've come from, the world, what are the beginnings, etc., and where we're going. But the underlying common denominator in all of these, or these two major groups, we see how there is the poignant presence of the self, which makes all of these 62 views wrong views. And the Buddha is going to start elaborating each of these. It's an extensive sutta. That's why we are dedicating several weeks to it, because it deserves to be explored properly. And I also mentioned, if you recall, how this is not just a sutta to point out the wrong views of others, other sects, which unfortunately the Brahmajāla Sutta, today's sutta, is unfortunately recognized as, or has been codified within the tradition to be nothing more than that. Meanwhile, it's completely wrong. Yes, there is the mention. Yes, the Buddha is clarifying what his contemporaries, or the contemporary thought of people was all about, the 62 views. But he also mentions how, throughout the sutta, we'll see this, that throughout the past, in the present, and in the future, this is basically the shopping list of wrong views that human beings will come out of. They will be leaning on one or more of these views, and that's it. Nothing else. There's no other views, because he's covering the whole gamut of wrong views. But not just of those people outside of the tradition, of this sasana, of this dispensation. Because this has everything to do with us as well, those of us who consider ourselves to be practitioners, for example. Because he's talking about not just the attitude, but the understanding of the Dhamma. So it's much deeper than simply historical or some social endeavor, or some social research, anthropological endeavor on the part of the Buddha to give us a historical purview of what was going on, or the views in India. That is unfortunately how people have portrayed this sutta, to their own detriment, and to the detriment of those who are really seeking to understand the Dhamma. And the Brahmajāla is a giant, is the mother of all, one would say, discourses. Because it's all about establishing right view. Remember, the Buddha is the medicine man. He is the teacher par excellence. He is the surgeon par excellence. But you cannot be a surgeon and leave the pus, the cause of the pus, the poison, the venom in the wound, in order for you to cure, to heal the patient. So he is first pointing us at the location of where the inflammation is. The pus is the wrong view, before he cuts into it and pulls out the cause of it. And we will see the cause coming back to ignorance, which goes far beyond the bounds of mere other traditions or sectarians of other, thoughts or schools of thought, or practitioners or philosophies of others. Those quotation marks have to be completely removed. It's far greater than that, the sutta, because it's showing us, asking us, in fact, beyond the 18 views that deal with the past, or the 44 that deal with the future, questioning the wrong views. But ultimately, the Buddha is asking, in a sense, the most important question: who's manning the ship? Who's at the helm of our lives? What are we run on? There is the holding on to, the craving, the longing to hold on to this, what we consider to be the solid sense of a self. Solid sense of a self, what we call Sakkaya Ditthi in the Dhamma. The I making, this is me, that is you, and we are two different beings, individual, independent, substantially present. That is at the crux of it. And this is another way of understanding avidya, because we are ignoring the fact, willfully we are ignoring, and when we are ignoring the fact of life, what we're doing is basically we are delaying. When you hold on to a view, what you're holding on to is a veil that we are saying, I am hiding my emotions behind it. I am hiding my feelings behind this view. Why? Because it's comfortable. People love to hide behind their beliefs. Meanwhile, life is happening right under their feet. They're not seeing it. For this reason, and I'm giving you a preview of what is to come in the following weeks. Before we reach the end of the sutta, we will see how the Buddha started with the Putujana, remember, but he's going to go to the noble disciple. What the noble disciple does, and how the noble disciple truly venerates and pays accolades to the Buddha, respectfully showing through the understanding that he or she has, and that is the understanding of the six sense doors. Specifically, what is taking place at the six sense doors. That has nothing to do with belief. That has nothing to do with delaying. That has everything to do with the Dhamma, everything to do with the teaching of the Buddha, because it removes us from this lifestyle that we have of living in absentia. That's why the ship is not being manned, is not being captained by other than our unmindfulness, asati. So it took me a long time to have the courage to come close to the Brahmajāla Sutta, because honestly, I was not interested in the views of other traditions, especially traditions that I thought were dead and gone, or at least part of Indian thinking. That is what I was taught for a long time by Sangha teachers, by academicians. Why? Because that is the tradition. That is the commentarial tradition. That is what happens when people do not practice. And that is when people delay. Why delay? There's a past, there's a future. Remember, 18 wrong views pertaining to the past and 44 pertaining to the future. Delay, because you have this drive for supplication, to beseech, to pray, to seek out help from the grace of a God, of a higher being, of a bigger S self, Mahatma, for example, versus the Atma, the Brahma. Well, what is that? What does that mean? That means you have given up on living your life responsibly. When you are beseeching for the grace of other beings to come and help you to live life, to make sense, when you believe in things like, well, it is written. I used to grow up with parents and elders in the family, in the culture, saying, well, it's all written in your forehead. God has written it. I really would go into the, in front of the mirror and try to see if there's anything readable, legible on my forehead. Because what that was is basically telling me that it's already determined. That's one view, one wrong view. So without getting into too much detail here as I'm preparing us for this second week, life happens or is happening, but we're not here to see it, greet it, understand it, and definitely to learn from it. We're too busy, lost in our beliefs. And holding on to the idea of a self is comfortable. It takes away your responsibility of life, which is one of the biggest reasons why the views come up, the wrong views specifically. And what I mean by this is the underlying, the deeply ingrained sense of, deeply rooted sense of fear of losing the self. And when you look at all these ideas throughout history, today, you have the modern anthropologist, you have the modern quantum scientist, you have the mathematicians, you have the philosophers, you have the psychologists, the scientists, so-called, of today. They all are latching on to the self. The self. And by the same token, they're terrified of what will happen to the self, which then necessitated human beings to come up with something that will give it an extra dose of life, or in this case, eternal life, which we will get to today. We'll see some of the views that discussed eternalism. Human beings came up with this because of their fear of what will happen to this self of mine. All these faith-based religions, what are they talking about? An extension to the lifespan of a self. Of course, there is the merging with this higher self, merging with God, with this Deva, with this Brahma, or being lost in it or sitting next to it. Very, very infantile. But that's what we have also in this tradition, where the person dies and we say, oh, may he or she attain parinibbana, may they attain parinibbana, may they attain nibbana in that life. In fact, people came up with this whole childish notions that there is a Buddha. In fact, there are multiple Buddhas living in different parts of the universe. We even have come up with philosophies to support such nonsense, to give us the hope that, yes, the self can be extended eternally, in fact. So there's no need for you to be afraid. It's very insulting to our sense of personal sovereignty when it comes to being able to make your own choices and decisions in life. Earlier, I was mentioning to students how it is, this Dhamma is not about gambling. You're not buying a lottery ticket when you are taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. You are saying, I'm going to be doing my best to maintain awareness of my behavior. That is what Sila is. You're saying, no matter what happens, no matter what situations I find myself in, I'm not going to be overcome. I'm not going to let go. I'm not going to later on pray, get down on my knees, pray to this God or that God and say, that God, please help me. Or this being came and did this to me, so I have no control over this or that. So you're living in absentia. Meanwhile, life is something that you already have. So these views have stripped us from our integrity of being and thinking for ourselves. Why? Because of contact. Contact in the form of feelings. Earlier I said, views are used to hide our feelings. And this is what we will see the Buddha clearly delineate when he says, Tadapi passa paccaya. That too is based on contact. That too is dependent on contact. All these views, no matter how lofty it is, Today you have atheists, you have different theoreticians who come up with their own ideas, they think. Meanwhile, when you look at what they're saying, you will trace them back to these 62 views, to their own disappointment and dismay that 26 centuries ago, the Buddha already laid it out flat in front of them on the table. So, but why fear? Why are we afraid of losing the self? Because identity is there. Because we long for us to break away from the law that is unavoidable. That's why it's called the law. And that is anicca, the law of impermanence. That's why even the devas are doomed, no matter how long they live. There's not a deva, not a god, no being anywhere in these 31 realms of existence that comprise existence. Nothing is left out. Where you have devas who beat that law, overcome that law, may become the exception. None. So this was one of the reasons why the Buddha was not liked, hated in fact, because he was pulling the rug from even underneath the highest of Brahmas in Indian cosmology, in their philosophies. And the Buddha would do the same thing today to even the quantum mechanics scientist, to the atomist, to the deterministic philosopher, to the ones who reductionistic views that they hold, that there is nothing beyond this life, and life is just, when you die, lights out, you're dead. But nevertheless, they are always living with anxiety and fear of losing the self, because even the atheist believes and knows in their mind, in their delusion, that I have a self. Why? Because they have feelings that cannot be really looked upon or carefully scrutinized, truthfully, with wrong view. Wrong views will simply come to cover them. And that is what we see here in the 62 views. So in a nutshell, I wanted to say just those few words before we dive back into the sutta itself. Again, this is the first of the Digha Nikaya. And so DN1, the Brahmajāla Sutta, the all-embracing net of wrong views. This will be part 2, meaning week number 2. So last week I covered all the way to the 3rd section, just the beginning of it, which is wrong views, ditthi. So let us start with the 18 views, and we will stop as needed. Okay, let's go. Part 3, ditthi, wrong view. 2nd week though. Pubbanta kappika, assumptions and beliefs about the past. However, bhikkhus, there are ways of understanding reality which are extremely deep, truly difficult to comprehend, let alone to penetrate and come to see or appreciate their depth and scope, for they are indeed excellent, so sublimely peaceful, beyond anything the mind could conjure up, utterly transcending the confines of logic. In fact, they are so beautiful in their subtlety that they can only be realized by the wise, that are few. Remember, he's doing the comparison between what I mentioned about the putujjana, the view of the worldling, the common, untrained, unpracticing, unlearned, ordinary person, who would only see the mundane, the superficial level of, oh, okay, oh, this holy person doesn't do this. Oh, this holy person washes 3 times instead of 2, so he must be cleaner. He must be more pure. See how ridiculous it is? It's not this is not an exaggeration. There are people who believe in that kind of stuff. So this is about the the individual who goes beyond the confines of logic, is curious to find out the truth instead of being told what the truth is. Huge difference between the two. Therefore, anyone who truly and sincerely wishes to pay homage by praising the Tathagata, by venerating him and offering him accolades properly, would be doing so rightfully if the reverence he is offering considers and is based upon these irrefutable facts. Now, this itself is what the Tathagata has revealed himself, which, having realized it through his own direct experiencing and penetrative insight, he now shares by introducing and making it known throughout. Therefore, when one personally becomes aware of these truths, stemming from their deep appreciation and bottomless respect of the extremely important and significant position of the Tathagata for sharing this Dhamma, and thus offers respect and accolades, then that indeed would be considered appropriate and not trivial at all. This because they would be venerating and honoring the truth that the Tathagata revealed to the world. You don't go and bow down to the Buddha because it's your religion that demands that you do. You don't jump through the hoops because it's expected of you, because it is the tradition, without having a deeper connection to why am I going to be doing this? Why am I offering dana? Why am I practicing sila? Why am I practicing meditation? Why means you are taking control of your ship. That is an image that I'm using for your life. Nobody else can guide you, guide your ship in this case, can live your life for you. And what are those ways of understanding reality, which are extremely deep, truly difficult to comprehend, let alone to penetrate and come to see or appreciate their depth and scope? For they are indeed excellent, so sublimely peaceful, beyond anything the mind could conjure up, utterly transcending the confines of logic. In fact, so beautiful in their subtlety that they can only be realized by the wise that are few. First, bhikkhus, one must consider that there are many recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins who engage in speculative thinking about the very beginning of the past, as they theorize by making assumptions about the past. Soon enough, they turn those speculations into assertions and beliefs, which they then formulate into entire systems of thought, which they claim to be their assumptions about the past, based upon 18 premises or frames of reference. And what, bhikkhus, are these 18 premises or frames of reference, which those recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins engaging in speculative thinking apply, while relying upon them as evidence for the validity of their assumptions and beliefs about the past? First is Sassatavada, eternalism. This is the first wrong view, which actually it's not just first, it comes in a collection of 1 through 4. So we have 4 within this category of that we call Sassatavada, which is eternalism. We're going to see later quasi-eternalism, where they make exceptions. Yeah, not completely eternal. There's this, that is eternal, that is that. Confused. It's like a blind person going and groping in the dark, trying to figure out what an elephant is. They were born blind, and they have never seen an elephant. It's like that. But the Dhamma isn't that. So why are we making it into that? That's not the Dhamma that the Lord Buddha talked about. So let's go now back in. So wrong views 1 through 4. Eternalism. Here, because there are such recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins who assert and believe in the past, while using the premise that existence as such is eternal, including the entire cosmos, as well as the self with which they identify. So, to point out the immutably eternal nature of both existence and the self, they use the following 4 premises as their sources or frames of reference. Now, what are these four frames of reference used by such recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins as premises for their claim that the self and existence are eternal? Firstly, bhikkhus, they use the method of recollecting details about one's past lives. Thus, a certain recluse, religious practitioner, or Brahmin, through diligent effort and with persistent resoluteness, focuses his attention by concentrating the mind, becoming well concentrated in this way, with a mind bright in its purity, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, yet unshakably steady. He then directs it towards recollecting and knowing his past lives. Hence, he is able to remember his many past lives in all their details and features. That is, 1 birth, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 births, 30, 40, 50 births, 100 births, 1,000 births, 100,000 births, recalling them all in this manner. There I was so named, of such a family, with such an appearance. Such was my food and sustenance. Such were my experiences of pleasure and pain. Such was my lifespan, and after passing away from there, I was reborn elsewhere. And there too I was so named, of such a family, with such an appearance. Such was my food and sustenance. Such were my experiences of pleasure and pain. And such was my lifespan. And passing away from there, I was reborn here. In this manner, he is able to recollect details and features about his numerous previous lives and existences. Then, on having obtained such information, he makes the following declaration. Indeed, truly everlasting is the self, as is the entire cosmos called existence. For they themselves are really colorless and barren, immovably there, just like a solid mountain peak, standing unshakably and unchanged as a firm pillar. Because these two, the self and existence, or the world you want to call it, remain eternally untouched and unchanged, while living beings come and go, arising and disappearing ceaselessly on their samsaric journey. And what is my proof to be saying this? This is the individual, by the way, the one who's coming up with his own or her own theory as to why the self and existence are both eternal. So he's saying, what is my proof? Well, I'll tell you why. It is because through diligent effort and with persistent resoluteness, whenever I focus my attention and get concentrated, I'm paraphrasing here, and have the mind become pure, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, and steady, I can then direct it to recollect many of my past lives in this manner. There I was so named, of such a family, with such an appearance, such was my food, etc., etc. And then after that death, I was reborn here. In this manner, when I am able to recollect details and features about my numerous previous lives and existences, then, given this information, I come to declare, indeed, truly everlasting is the self, as is the entire cosmos called existence. For they themselves are totally and really colorless and barren, immovably there. So basically, it's like the clothes hanger. Think of it as a clothes hanger, the self. You have many clothes that you can hang on them, and you keep using the same clothes hanger. Let's say you only have one, and you keep changing your clothing. Every time you hang a new one and you hang it in the closet. So this person is seeing it barren, lifeless, but colorless rather, and barren. But the different bodies that this individual is going through, meaning from life to life, they're the ones that are changing. But I have an essence. I must have an essence because I'm seeing it. And the person, for all intents and purposes, because of their meditation, yogic meditation, they were seeing different lives. But there is a lack in panya. They were not understanding that there does not need to be something solid there. They were completely clueless about anicca, impermanence. See, the focus is on something else, because this means this individual is working from a place of fear of losing that sense of self. So automatically you start looking for evidence to support your longing, your yearning. You see this in science, or these researchers who believe in something and they go looking for evidence. That is not scientific method at all, because you're simply trying to look for something to prove your position, and that is not living truthfully at all, because you're on a mission to prove a point and not live the truth of what is really happening, despite your views and feelings about what is happening. That's what makes these wrong views, because they have nothing to do with what is really happening. This, therefore, because is the first of 4 frames of reference used by such recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins as premises for their claim that the self and existence are eternal. And what is the second frame of reference used by such recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins as premises for their claim that the self and existence are eternal? Here, bhikkhus, a certain recluse, religious practitioner, or Brahmin, through diligent effort and with persistent resoluteness, focuses his attention by concentrating the mind. Becoming well concentrated in this way, with a mind bright in its purity, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, yet unshakably steady, then directs it towards recollecting and knowing his past lives. So this is another yogi who's practicing concentration, some type of a samadhi, to collect his thoughts, to calm down, and to go and be able to look into one's own past. There's nothing mystical about this, by the way. Thus, he is able to remember his many past lives in all their details and features. That is, 1 eon of a cosmic expansion and contraction, 2, 3, 4, 5, or even up to 10 eons of cosmic expansions and contractions. We call them mahakappas. Recalling them all in this manner. There I was so named, of such a family, with such an appearance. Such was my food and sustenance. Such were my experiences of pleasure and pain. Such was my lifespan. And after passing away from there, I was reborn elsewhere. And there too I was so named, of such a family, with such an appearance. Such was my food and sustenance. Such were my experiences of pleasure and pain. And such was my lifespan, and passing away from there, I was reborn here. In this manner, he is able to recollect details and features about his numerous previous lives and existences. Then, on having obtained such information, he makes the following declaration. Indeed, truly everlasting is the self, as is the entire cosmos called existence. For they themselves are really colorless and barren, immovably there, always there, just like a solid mountain peak, standing unshakably and unchanged as a firm pillar. Because these two remain eternally untouched and unchanged, while living beings come and go, arising and disappearing ceaselessly on their samsaric journey. And what is my proof to be saying this? It is because I saw it, basically. He's saying through his practice. There's a lot for me to cover. That's why I'm paraphrasing. By the way, just to remind those of you who are joining you today, the sutta, unlike other suttas, I haven't posted online on the website, mindrelease.com, yet, because I still am proofreading. Aya is helping me, so that I want to put it up there once it's completely proofread. So hopefully within the next few weeks. I know I said that last week, but it's been very busy. So once it is available, we will post a PDF, which I highly recommend you review it and you listen to it, or just read it as you go on. But don't skip, please. Don't paraphrase like I am. I'm trying to spare my voice too. Anyhow, moving on. That is 1 eon of a cosmic expansion and contraction, 2, 3, 4, 5, or even up to 10 eons of cosmic expansions and contractions, where I'm able to recall all these in detail, he's saying. So I have seen it. I'm not making up anything the person is saying. But what is the attitude? The Buddha would ask. What are you working with? Oftentimes we forget the presence of ahara, nutrition or nutriment. He called 4 aharas, 4 types of nutriment. The first is normal food that we eat, kabalinkara ahara. The second is contact. It's all based on contact. This person is coming up with conclusions based on the contacting that he is making, first with the feelings that he is feeling generated in him as he's seeing these different things, which comes to concretize his firmer beliefs already. See, I have evidence. Therefore, the universe is eternal. End of story. End of story. So it's like a person who only saw a snippet of a painting, a small portion of a jigsaw puzzle, or a small portion of a movie, or a small section, a line from a big, thick novel, and saying, oh, this book is about that. This is what's happening. Well, it was just one line, let's say, if you've read a very massive novel, such as, let's say, Lord of the Rings, for example, and you just pick one line from any of those novels or sections, and then you say, this is what's going to happen, this is what it is all about, without having read any portion of it. It's as ridiculous as that, despite the fact that this individual is saying Mahakalpas in his meditation. That's not the whole picture. Let's remember Baka, the Brahmaja that we covered a few years ago, I think, or a year ago. He believed that he was eternal. He was God. He was the Almighty. Why? Because he saw many world systems come and go. And to give him some credit, you would say, well, yeah, put yourself in his shoes. And you see big bangs come and go, galaxies come and go, civilizations of different beings come and go. And you say, I guess I am God because I'm still here. But it's completely deluded, because that still is only a portion of the reality that is happening. And you develop certain feelings about that. That's why he was resistant to the Buddha, who went to chastise him and said, no, Baka, you're also subject to impermanence. You will drop from this state, because nothing that is conditioned, nothing that is conditioned could stay untouched by anicca. Everything is changing, including you, Baka, including this world, in this heavenly world. Many billions of people are very uncomfortable when they hear such a thing, by the way, because they have bet everything they own, their whole farm, as they say. They bet the whole farm on this idea that when I die, I'm going to go with this God. I'm going to sit right on this right side, or I'm going to merge with this Deva, with this Brahma, with this God somewhere. I'm going to be one with the oneness of the God, of the godliness of the this, of the that. All hogwash, nonsense, when it comes to reality, that the 6 sense doors, they cannot compare to this reality of experience that is being done with contact, coming and knocking on every single one of those doors. Each of these are far more truthful than the highest God that you can attach yourself to in reality, in its truthfulness, in your sovereignty of understanding that you are here alone to live your life. Stop holding on to mommy's skirt. Stop holding on to this fake belief system that people have come up with. because it teaches us to be cowards, because we are delaying responsible living. So even the yogis were wrong, as we see here. This, therefore, bhikkhus, is the second of the 4 frames of reference used by such recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins as premises for their claim that the self and existence are eternal. And what is the 3rd frame of reference used by such recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins as premises for their claim that the self and existence are eternal? Here, bhikkhus, a certain recluse, religious practitioner, or Brahmin, through diligent effort and with persistent resoluteness, focuses his attention by concentrating his mind. So similarly, they're going into deep jhana. Then he is able to remember his many past lives in all their details and features. That is 10 eons of cosmic expansion and contractions, 20, 30, or even up to 40 eons of cosmic expansions and contractions. So this person's limit is about 40 eons. There I was so named, of such a family, with such an appearance, such was my food and sustenance, etc., etc. In this manner, he is able to recollect details and features about his numerous previous lives and existences. Then, on having obtained such information, it is information, right? It is some type of an experiencing. It's not like they're lying, but how they're interpreting the information, that is the important part here to consider, to be aware of. So he makes the following declaration. Indeed, truly everlasting is the self, as is the entire cosmos called existence. For they themselves are really colorless and barren, immovably there, just like a solid mountain peak, standing unshakably and unchanged as a firm pillar. Because these two remain eternally untouched and unchanged. And what is my proof to be saying this? It is because, he repeats it, I have seen it through my practice. I was seeing up to 40 eons of cosmic expansion and contraction. And by the way, those are the cosmic expansion of the, think of the Big Bang, even though it's not entirely accurate, but let's use that model. As it's expanding, currently it is in the expansion state. So about 13.7 billion years, they say. It's expanding, and it's going to continue expanding for some time until it reaches that maximum point of expansion. And then it's like an inhale and an exhale. And the exhale would be the this expansion, and then the inhale would be the contraction, which takes about the same amount of time. So that's a long time period. You can imagine what a person, or how a person can be fooled into thinking that, wow, it's almost like time doesn't exist. But the self does, yeah, so it has to be eternal. That's my conclusion. Okay. That's why none of the yogis were awakened. The Buddhas, the Siddhartha Gautama's own teachers, were the highest achieved meditators of the time, Alara Kalama and Uddakarama Putta. But they failed miserably in seeing their own delusion because they still had the defilements in their hearts of passion, greed, lobha, of hatred, dosa, and moha, delusion. Now, they were not experiencing these while they were in those jhanic states. Of course, they won't see it. And they say, oh, I'm so pure. And then when they come out, that's when it's there. Nothing was changed. And the Buddha saw that. Siddhartha Gautama saw that. His heart was not yet stainless and pure. Because it's not just in the jhana that you're supposed to feel that. Otherwise, it's just suppressing. That's why very few people have attained during a retreat. Very, very few. When today's meditating schools of, I guess, thought or practice that they have, some types of practice, in jhana practices, that everybody goes to retreats to attain something. Meanwhile, the real place to attain is life itself. not the retreat. I would get a list, by the way, because I was, as a layman, I used to participate in some of those retreats, and I would, because I was in the, senior disciples or senior student category, there would be a discussion of list of, okay, so how many Sakadagamis? This, oh, you're not going to believe, we have 16 Sakadagamis, 54 Sotapannas, 3 non-returners, and 1 Arahant. Wow, all in this retreat? Yes. I might be sounding somewhat comical about it, but it was, in fact, very comical if you know the Dhamma. And most of these people don't, really, because they're functioning on their own contact, specifically the way they feel, specifically about how their emotional signature is, what they want to see in life, including what they want to see happen in and through the Dhamma, having nothing to do with the Dhamma, mind you. Do you see why I said that this is not about 62 views of other sects? It's about us, those of us who claim to be practicing the Buddha word. That's why we have to know it ourselves, individuals, what these suttas are really saying as individuals, and practice it proper. So this, therefore, because is the third of the 4 frames of reference used by such recluses. And what is the 4th frame of reference used by such recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins as premises for their claim that the self and existence are eternal? Here, bhikkhus, a certain recluse, religious practitioner, or Brahmin, through the application of his rational thinking, reasons out by logical means and reaches a conclusion as a result of a series of exhaustive investigations of himself and the world. Given his deductions from the logical examinations gathered, he then comes out with the declaration: indeed, truly everlasting is the self, as is the entire cosmos called existence. For they themselves are truly and really colorless and barren, immovably there, just like a solid mountain peak, standing unshakably and unchanged as a firm pillar, because these two remain eternally untouched and unchanged, while living beings come and go, arising and disappearing ceaselessly on their samsaric journey. Now this, therefore, bhikkhus, is the 4th of the 4 frames of reference used by such recluses as premises for their claim that the self and existence are eternal. Hence, these are the 4 frames of reference. Therefore, whatever recluses, religious practitioners, or Brahmins who assert and believe in the premise that existence as such is eternal, along with the self with which they identify, as they point out the immutably eternal nature of existence, they all would be using or relying on one or another of these 4 premises as their sources or frames of reference. That is so because outside these 4 frames of reference, there can be none. And that is the Buddha's authoritative declaration and his final, his period that he put at the end of that sentence. So whoever is going to come up with an eternalistic view is going to be using one of these 4. Now, it is a spectrum. Remember, we're going to see 18 schools of thought. It's 18 wrong views. We only covered 4 of them. So all of these 18 have something to do with the eternalistic view. So whoever you see here in the world today, contemporaries of us, our time, as well as those in the future, as well as in the past, all come out from this bag of wrong views, with a snippet of this, a pinch of that, a dollop of this, added this and that. But these are the ingredients. The creationists, the theologians' world, anybody who's bowing at some holy place, hoping to have, yes, I will go and sit in God's lap, or next to him, or something, or like that, or merge with the divine, the 18. They fall in one or more, mixture of them. After all, this itself is the understanding of the Tathagata, who clearly knows and sees that if anyone attaches oneself to and identifies with any one of these premises, it leads one back into yet another birth, for it surely keeps one trapped within the cyclical becomings of samsara, without any hope at all for an escape beyond it. So long as there's an identification, that means we are still part of the show. You have not figured out the magician's magic tricks. Because once you do, you see the mechanism behind it. And that is what I was referring to earlier today, of looking at the 6 sense spaces and the importance of contact being made at each of these 6 doors. Those are the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. That is where it's happening. Contact is happening. That is the only thing that your focus has to be on. Not delaying responsible living. Manning your own ship is all about that. Being at each of these doors as they occur. There's no belief involved. You don't have to believe anyone, including the Buddha's word. There's no belief. And that's what, unfortunately, all dhammas in the past, all teachings of the Buddhas in the past have fallen and disappeared, because people will turn them into beliefs because it's easier. That's what the lazy mind wants. That's why they are putujanas. But this is leading us out of putujana land, if you notice. Last week was all about putujana. Now the Buddha's explaining where the inflammation is, where the main culprit, where the pus is, what needs to be removed. And he's going to clarify as we go throughout these 62 views. You're going to see where the noble disciple is, because the noble disciple has seen the escape from this. That's a big, big revelation, big understanding, big difference between these yogis and the individual who has seen what is really taking place, has seen the magician's tricks, if you will. Thus, beyond it, as it relates to his understanding of this truth, which is why he has indeed quenched his thirst and attained to extinction. By the way, that's a term that many people don't feel comfortable with, extinction. That's part of us. If you feel uncomfortable with the term extinction or annihilation in this sense of a self, that is, that comes from our deeply held fear of losing a self. Remember, it's deeply ingrained in the human mind through countless eons of looking and holding up and identifying a sense of self in you, in the world, around you, in other people. But extinction is a definition for nibbana, by the way. That's why a lot of authors, a lot of translators choose to use nibbana versus extinction, because it makes the reader continue on reading for another page and not close the book and put it away, because it would make the person feel uncomfortable. But that's what nibbana is, the extinction of craving, the extinction of that sense of self being different, substantial, unchanging. That is being extinct, is gone. But anyhow, I don't want to go ahead of myself here. Okay. Thus, by fully comprehending the whole process of arising, of falling away, and of disappearing, of the constant pursuit of gratification, the dangers that it brings, and especially the very escape from all kinds of feelings, the Tathagata has truly attained to ultimate freedom by entirely giving up all grabbing with its tenacious tendency to hold on. And these are the 5 which you do not find in any other tradition, in any other teaching. That is, the arising, the falling away, and disappearing. The seeking, the pursuit of gratification and satisfaction, and the dangers which that leads, and ultimately becoming dispassionate about all this and choosing to escape, looking for an escape route. That system of 5 layers of understanding is what is the distinguishing mark of the Tathagata's dispensation. Because unless we have that, especially the last portion, the escape, these are not supposed to be mystical or in some way poetic explanations. No, the arising is the arising of, think of it as a passion, the arising of an urge to do something. You want to do something, to pursue something, you want to grab something, you want to experience a pleasurable experience. So it shows up. That's samudaya, that's arising. But it will go away. Anicca. It will go away. It will die out. And now what are you going to do? You're going to want to go after another one. So the arising and then the going away is the dropping, is the ending of that experience. You want it to last, but it doesn't. You want to taste that thing and you want it to last forever. It won't. And now the mind says, oh, let's go after that. This is all craving action, by the way. Don't worry, we'll go there. We'll taste that now. We'll try that flavor instead of this flavor. That is seeking of gratification, which we will never attain. And that is what the Buddha is teaching here. Because that quest is what has kept us in samsara. And will continue to do so, so long as we don't see this actual formula, the map with which we can escape. Because as you see this, at least the 3, eventually you're like, oh, arising, falling, seeking of gratification, satisfaction, which I will never attain. Then you see the danger in that. Danger in reference to future activity that will be of the same theme, in the same hamster wheel. You're still locked in prison. That is dangerous. So what do? You look for the number 5 in this case. The escape from it. Show me the exit. Where's the exit? Show me the exit. When I was 21, I was taken to, this is when I used to live in Los Angeles. They said, oh, let's go to Las Vegas. Oh, you can go to Las Vegas, you can go into the casinos, you know, there's age limits and things. I said, okay. I go in, there's noise, this and smell, certain smells, unusual environment, lights everywhere, distraction. I felt terrible headache just walking there. But then something else I noticed, very troublesome. I said, where are the clocks? Where's the time? And then even worse, where is the exit? I couldn't find any. Years later, I realized that the engineers or the designers of those locations, of those types of establishments, they make it a point to make the exit as confusing as possible. In fact, they remove the exit signs, unless there's an emergency and I guess certain lights, but you will never see it in normal hours, which by the way includes 24 hours. So I felt trapped. I could not escape. And when I asked several people, workers there, they showed me. Finally, I came outside. I felt so resentful that willingly I went into prison, walked into a prison, and I couldn't get out. And that's the image I just got from the, because that's multiply that by an entire life that we live with, you know, being completely dependent on the senses. And these philosophers, these thinkers are in no way immune to feeling. That's why they are conjuring up these ideas and belief systems, thoughts, wrong views, to cover, to veil what they're really feeling, because they're all being touched by contact in one way or the other. So their whole theory is based on feeling, based on contact, which means they're blind to what's really happening. To the sixth sense doors. And that's the only exit. And it's a wonderful exit because it cuts you off from the delusion. And it gives you the audacity to live life with freedom. You're no longer trapped, despite the whole, everyone actually following a pattern that follows these 62 in one way or the other. Thus, therefore, because these are the teachings, the ways of understanding reality, which are extremely deep, truly difficult to comprehend, let alone to penetrate and come to see or appreciate their depth and scope. For they are indeed excellent, so sublimely peaceful, beyond anything the mind could conjure up, utterly transcending the confines of logic. In fact, they are so beautiful in their subtlety that they can only be realized by the wise that are few. Now, this itself is what the Tathagata has himself revealed, having realized it through his own direct experiencing and penetrative insight. And he now shares it by introducing and making it known throughout. What a lovely, lovely thing. He did not keep it for himself. He shares it to this day, to this moment, as we're reading together the Brahmajāla. We see that's what he is doing. He's sharing. That's why Buddhas don't happen all the time. That's why Dhammas that the Dhamma that the Buddha reveals, and only a Buddha can reveal the Dhamma, is so rare. And to be born at a time when the Dhamma is still available and is being taught is truly, truly rare. And to be listening to the Dhamma, to be curious in knowing the Dhamma while living in a human body that works, that functions, that's healthy, still able to process information, to understand what Buddha is saying. The Dhamma that a Buddha has revealed. It's truly remarkably rare for us to be alive, therefore. That's why we cannot afford to waste any time. To say, I'll do it next, I have this to do, Bhante, 10 years, I have to take care of this business, and after that, I will seriously practice. What's wrong with now? Are you still going to experience life through the six sense doors for the next 10 years? You're still going to be alive, right? All that is opportunity lost because there is the big unknown of death. Because next time we come, most probably there will not be any Dhamma. This is like the last ending days of the Dhamma, if this continues, with the disinterest in the true and genuine Dhamma of Lord Buddha's, because it has become a belief system. What we have today is very much part and parcel of these 62 views that we have and we're going through. That's dangerous. That's why you going back to the suttas here is remarkably wonderful. You're taking the bull by the horns, as they say in English. You're manning your own ship. And how lovely is that? To this end, anyone who truly and sincerely wishes to pay homage by praising the Tathagata, venerating and offering him accolades properly, would be doing so rightfully while considering and basing his reverence upon these irrefutable facts. Now, the facts here are not about those wrong views, but they are about the mechanism that the Buddha highlights at the end of each of these bundles of wrong views, namely the rise, the fall, the seeking, the pursuit of gratification or satisfaction, the danger in doing that, the perils that that involves, and the escape, which is what the Dhamma is all about. The second group, which includes wrong views, numbers 5 to 8. This one is the Ekachasatavada, almost or quasi-eternal. That's how I translated it. So they believe in, well, it's not completely eternal. There's a little bit of, non-eternal. So wrong views, numbers 5 to 8. Bhikkhus, there are recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins who assert and believe in the premise that existence as such is almost or quasi-eternal, as is the case with the self, with which they identify and claim to be partly eternal as well. So, to point out the partly eternal and partly non-eternal nature of existence, they use the following 4 premises as their sources or frames of reference. Now, what are these 4? Firstly, bhikkhus, after a very long time has passed, there begins the period where the cosmos or existence itself begins to shrink and contract onto itself. So, I was saying earlier about the expansion and contraction. Now, during that cosmic contraction, living beings find themselves taking rebirth and reappearing into the Brahmajāla world, called the streaming radiance divine realm, a dimension of existence where the bodies of beings residing in it are all mind-made. That is, generated and fashioned by the mind. The nourishment these beings take in as their sustenance is spiritual joy itself, piti. And as such, their bodies are self-luminous, levitating and floating about through space. They live thus radiantly beautiful for a very long time in their untouched and unthreatened glory. A very, very long time, by the way. Eventually, however, bhikkhus, there does come a period after an incalculably long time has passed, where the cosmos starts growing and expanding again. When this inflationary stage is unfolding, then a vastly empty divine mansion, a majestic Brahma palace, suddenly manifests. It is at this time that a certain Brahmadeva, dwelling within the streaming radiance Abhasara world, upon the exhaustion of his merits that led him to be reborn there in the first place, reaches the end of his lifespan within that divine Brahma world, and thus he dies and falls away from among the rest of the devas of streaming radiance. That God dies. All things that are conditioned, all things that have a beginning, have an end. Then this being immediately reappears into that vastly empty Brahma palace, where again, so the first streaming radiance was a higher, think of it as a higher realm, divine realm. And then through that vast emptiness, beneath that space, this is in the expansionary period or inflationary period of the universe, there appears this, what the Buddha is calling that Brahma world mansion or palace. Then this being immediately reappears into that vastly empty Brahma palace, where again he finds himself inhabiting a self-luminous, subtle, mind-made body, one that is fashioned and generated by the mind. But nevertheless, it is of a lower quality than the previous realm where he was, before his death. There too, this Brahma God sustains himself by nourishing on spiritual joy, piti, dwelling in the sky, moving about and wandering unhindered through space for a very, very long time indeed. So this Brahma God is now alone. He's the first one to show up there as he dropped from the higher dimension. Eventually, however, there comes a time when this being feels uneasy, becomes anxious and restless, given the boredom that living in such a realm all alone may arouse in such a being. So he's anxious. This Deva, this Brahma God now is anxious. He's bored. So he begins reflecting. Oh, It would be so wonderful and truly amazing if other beings would also come and join me here, where we could live and enjoy this beautiful realm, all of us together. So he wants company. Then it so happens that many other Brahma Devas, also having lived out their lifespan in the streaming radiance Abhasara world, at the exhaustion of their own merits, one after another, they die, likewise falling away from their companionship of the other Devas of streaming radiance. These beings then immediately reappear in that vastly empty Brahma palace, into the company of that once solitary Brahma Deva. So the others who were part of that retinue, if you call it, of that higher realm, from where this one dropped and now was alone for a long time, others also, having reached the ending of their meritorious deeds, the good deeds that have landed them in those realms, they too, having dropped from that level, come and land into this world. Now, the newcomer devas also find themselves inhabiting self-luminous, subtle mind-made bodies that were again fashioned and generated by the mind, sustaining themselves on spiritual joy as nourishment, living in the sky as they too move about, traveling unhindered through space for a very long time. Then, the being who had first appeared into that vastly empty Brahma realm begins to reflect. Again, apparently, I am the one and only Brahma, the Maha-Brahma himself, the highest of all gods, the conqueror and the unvanquished, the one with the universal eye that sees everything, everywhere, the mighty and powerful creator of all, the supreme being, the progenitor and originator of all things, the Alpha Supreme himself, the Almighty God, who deems and ordains all things to happen, the all-powerful creator and Father supreme to all beings born and all those who are yet to be born. So that's a conclusion he's making based on the observation that he had made. In that realm, there was nobody. Then I had the thought, it's boring here of being alone. It would be great if I can have other beings join me. Oops, one after another, they showed up. Oh, I guess I'm responsible for that. Oh, okay. They're my children. I am their father. Okay, that settles it. I am God. For truly, all these beings who keep arriving into this realm must be my children, my own creations, every one of them. And why do I say this? It is because I was the only one and the first one here who had thought and the wish. Oh, it would be wonderful and truly amazing. So he's repeating what I just said. Therefore, with this being my heart's desire, it soon came to pass, as they all showed up one after another and joined my company in this place, exactly as I had wished them to. Meanwhile, all those other beings who had followed him into that Brahma realm also began reflecting. Truly, this is the one and only Brahma, the Maha-Brahma himself, the highest of all gods, the conqueror and unvanquished, the one with the universal eye, etc., etc. For truly, all of us beings who keep arriving into this realm are his children, his own creations, each and every one of us. And why do I say this? It is because he was the one who appeared into this realm first. It was only much later that we arrived here and joined his company. Also, there is a clear distinction in the illustrious glow, radiance, and beauty of our Lord, who is far older and ancient than all of us who arrived here after him. So you see, feelings, take in whatever the observation is and paint it, how you're feeling. Oh, this is it. Oh, okay, so it must be this. Oh, it's got to be this. It's got to be this. Contact, even at the level of Brahma gods. That's why they are not off the hook. They can be just as dumb as any putujana, card member, carrying card member, as they say, putujana land. Now, because it is only a matter of time that eventually, having spent and thus exhausted the merits of his rebirth in that Brahma realm, one of those beings dies and falls away from the company of those Brahma gods, and instead finds himself reborn into the human realm. Then it so happens that this human being, so one of those gods now, because everybody has a different level of good deeds, consequences, merits, what we call merits, punya. So it's not all the same. So you will have constantly beings who are born into realms and beings falling out at different rates, different times, different, spans of time, having spent different spans of time. So such a deva, such a Brahma god will fall. And usually they will fall below a human realm because it's also very rare to be born a human unless you really have good merits, but not good enough to stay in those realms, in the higher realms. So one such individual, being, falls into the human realm. Then it so happens that this human being at one point or another decides to go forth as he walks off from home life into homelessness. Later, through his diligent effort and with persistent resoluteness, he engages in the practice of meditation by focusing his attention and becoming well concentrated. Thus, he attains to a level of concentration that settles his heart into a state of collectedness, samadhi, some type of samadhi, whereby he is then able to remember and recollect the details of his last birth, just his last birth, spent within that Brahma realm, but nothing of his previous births preceding it. Later, as a result of his discovery through recollection of his previous life within that Brahma realm, he makes the following assertion. Truly, he is the one and only Brahma, the Maha-Brahma himself, the highest of all gods, the conqueror and unvanquished, the one with the universal eye that sees everything everywhere, the mighty and powerful creator of all, the supreme being, the progenitor and originator of all things, the Alpha Supreme himself, the Almighty God who deems and ordains all things to happen, the all-powerful creator and Father Supreme to all beings born and all those who are yet to be born. After all, it was through him and because of him, the Lord, that we were all created once. This because surely he remains untouched and eternal. Sounds familiar? Most of the faith books and things that we've come across, the mind, you have to allow it to really now make the connections. That's what the Dhamma also does. All of a sudden, it expands our views, understanding, perspective widens, and you're going to have a lot of aha moments when you study the Dhamma proper. You go, and you practice, of course. You go, that's wonderful. That's refreshing. That means you're letting the old die. You're taking charge of your life. It's wonderful. You're living for the first time through the Dhamma and what it gives you with understanding, not belief, not belief. Non-perishing and never declining. So he's still going on about the accolades of his God. Never declining, utterly unchanged eternally when all that is around him changes. We, on the other hand, having been fashioned and created by him, are certainly not like him, for we are not eternal, but are short-lived and weak, always declining and changing, subject to die and perish, which is the reason why we were now reborn here, this time as human beings. Again, he's using his own experiences. But even experiences can be misleading if they are guided by avidya, not looking wider. Just to have that moment of, really? That indicates intelligence. When it's not malintent, with malintent, you're serious, like, really? Am I 100% positive about that? Really? This because is the first of four premises or frames of reference that some recluses use to point out the partly eternal and partly non-eternal nature of existence upon which they rely as their source or frame of reference. So here in this interpretation of quasi-eternalism, this individual is saying, oh, God is eternal, but I, on the other hand, am not. See the difference between the first group of 1 through 4 wrong views? That person was saying self and existence are all eternal because of them seeing so many different lifetimes. But in this case, there's actual cast of characters. He sees a God. Oh, okay, all right. We showed up. Okay, so we're the subject. We're these babies. We're children. Okay, and now we are here. He's still there, so he must be God. Okay, let's build some temples for him. There is, bhikkhus, a category. So this is the second one. The category of devas who spend their very long lifespans enjoying all that sense pleasures could provide. Thus, they live without any sense of moderation and spend their time in depravity, indulging and intoxicating themselves in all manner of merriment, laughter, and pleasure seeking. As a result, they lose all semblance of alertness and mindfulness, and eventually die and fall away from those heavenly realms, finding themselves reborn into the human realm. Then it so happens that in time, one such human being decides to go forth as he walks off from home life into homelessness. Later, through his diligent effort and with persistent resoluteness, he engages in meditation practice by focusing his attention on becoming well concentrated. Thus, he attains to a level of concentration and settles his heart into a state of samadhi, and he is able to remember and recollect the details of his last birth, spent enjoying and indulging himself within that divine realm, but none of his previous births preceding that are remembered. Later, as a result of his discovery through recollection of his previous life within that heavenly realm, he makes the following assertion. Truly, there are gods who are not depraved, who live eternally and are completely unshakable and everlasting. They surely do not perish nor wither at all, and thus remain throughout eternity, glorious in their divine grace, surrounded by their hosts of gods. For they do not lose their alertness, nor forget their role and importance. Hence, they are the ones living with awareness. We, on the other hand, were short-lived, although devas nonetheless. We lived not knowing nor understanding the meaning of moderation, as we indulged in all kinds of sense pleasures, intoxicated by our depravity, always seeking some kind of merriment and laughter. And as a result, we forgot our role. We lost our awareness completely and thus died and fell away from those heavenly realms, finding ourselves reborn into this human realm. This then, bhikkhus, is the second of four premises or frames of reference that some recluses use to point out the partly eternal and partly non-eternal nature of existence, upon which they rely as their source or frame of reference. So here you see another ex-deva who's now a human. He's now seeing the differences between devas. He's seeing, oh, they were really pure. Unlike us, who were just going crazy, engaging in all kinds of sense pleasures imaginable. But because of that, we fell. So that kind of lifestyle is potentially wrong. So let's try to not do those that much this time, and maybe we will be reborn in that realm. Okay, and hopefully if we really refine ourselves and really become religious, maybe we can actually join the retinue of that higher God. So you see now you're establishing and extending the whole structure, non-existent structure, by the way, of a hierarchy, divine hierarchy, based on the conclusions that people have made, that you have made in this case, the person. And Lord Buddha is just, pulling the veil from all these things, showing us what they really are and how they originate, these wrong views. This is the third one. Maybe we'll do this, the following one, and the last of this yeah, so two more, and we'll stop. So here we have 2.3, the third of these quasi. There is, bhikkhus, another category of devas with corrupted hearts, who are jealous and envious of others, seeking what others possess and enjoy. Thus they live with their focus being on others, dominated by their excessive discontent with their state, which leads them to experience anger and resentment. As a result, their subtle deva bodies become tired under the heavy weight of anger and envy, overwhelming their tainted deva hearts. Which is why soon enough exhaustion takes over and they die. Falling away from that state, they find themselves reborn into the human realm. Then it so happens that in time, one such human being decides to go forth as he walks off from home life into homelessness. So that is a theme that it's like a refrain we're going to see. Because for the average person who just dropped into human realm from a deva realm, who goes on living the life of a putujjana without thinking deeply into, is this all there is to life? Could there be another facet of life that I'm not aware of? And eventually reach that point of Brahmaja, of renouncing and going forth. Most people will not, most beings will not, but this is the exception, even within putujjanas, to go and wonder, like, what is this the meaning? Is this the meaning of life? What? And they eventually, if they are fortunate, I guess, will find their way to a practice that is shown to them so that they can calm the mind enough so that they can penetrate through the veils of existence, especially in the case of the past life, and see where they came from, literally. But that doesn't mean much, because if the person is deluded, they're going to use that information to build more houses of cards, rather. Delusions, wrong views. So he becomes well concentrated. Later, as a result of his discovery through recollection of his previous life, within that heavenly realm, he makes the following assertion. Truly, there are gods with uncorrupted hearts, who look upon other gods with kindly eyes, and not with envy. They surely are the ones who live eternally and are completely unshakable and everlasting. They surely do not perish nor wither at all, because they do not let their hearts and bodies become dominated either by jealousy or envy. Hence, they do not get exhausted by the heaviness of anger or resentment at all, which is why they remain throughout eternity, glorious in their divine grace, surrounded by their hosts of gods. Do you see here even the wrong view of a god? This god, or once upon a time a god, is already very conceited. You over there are higher than me who is inferior to you. Conceit of a self, what we call in Pali asmimana, the conceit of I am. So it doesn't matter in Buddhism, it's not just like a superiority complex. No, we have 3 grades of conceit, right? Looking at others from a superior position, saying, I am better than you, or the opposite, looking at others from an inferior position, you are better than me, or equally looking at, just constant comparing, contrasting. You and I are, I'm trying, we are kind of equal, yeah, but all of which is still very conceited, because there is a strong latching on, tenacious grabbing to this idea of an independent, substantially there kind of a self that is intact. So I just have to fix the outside layer. Otherwise, the essence is the same. Still wrong view. So now is now going to say there are good gods, and now, we, on the other hand, although devas, nevertheless, were short-lived, because we lived with discontent, allowing ourselves to become jealous and envious of others, always resentful and angry at others, which is why our hearts and bodies became unburdened and heavy, and because of that, we were soon exhausted and died. remember when I see the words here, allowing ourselves to become jealous and envious of others as a God. And I remember the Old Testament, God, as a kid learning about, he says, I'm a jealous God. What kind of a God are you? If you're jealous, if you're allowing yourself to be angry, killing people and giving authority to your followers to go and kill others, what kind of a God is that? Most probably he's not even a God anymore. He's dumped into the lower realms by now. Because there's a heaviness in holding anger and resentment in your heart. The light, the body of a deva is very light. And the higher up they become more and more subtle. There's no way that the heart of a deva can hold on to or even have within it this thick, saturated, ego-filled anger, resentment, jealousy. Again, when you're encountering the Dhamma, it's always good to expand and look at what you have been familiar with growing up vis-a-vis God and other themes of, what we're discussing. Therefore, we were not eternal at all, but subject to change and death, which is why we died and fell away from those heavenly realms, finding ourselves reborn into this human realm. This then, bhikkhus, is the third of four premises or frames of reference that some recluses use to point out the partly eternal and partly non-eternal nature of existence, upon which they rely as their source of or frame of reference. And now, the last one here for today, 2.4. Here, bhikkhus, a certain recluse, religious practitioner or Brahmin, through the application of his rational thinking, reasons out by logical means as he reaches a conclusion, as a result of a series of exhaustive investigations of himself and the world. Given his deductions from the logical examinations gathered, he then comes out with the declaration. This thing called an eye, an ear, a nose, a tongue, and a body, including the self within it, are all impermanent, changing constantly, never the same, unstable and unreliably fickle, for they are all constantly in a state of decline. So when you just see that and say, okay, maybe this person is onto something. Maybe they can understand the Dhamma. Hold on. Not so fast. Let's see what his other beliefs are. However, that which is called mind or consciousness is truly unchanging, for it is truly permanent, stable and everlasting, non-decaying, and thereby it remains forever and throughout all time into eternity. Do you see here quasi-eternalism? He started on the right foot, but then delusion kicked in. Because remember, we cannot underestimate the role of feeling in this. In this case, emotions, how we feel about things. Essentially, the views we come up with are simply us having shopped around for something that matches, that hides well enough that feeling to make us feel adequate and not inadequate in a world of possibilities and uncertainties, especially when we have that deep-rooted fear in us, fear of death. That's what these reviews are all about, right? You're simply checking to see whether you have a parachute on. In case this plane goes down, do I have a parachute? And these are wrong views, or there's that. You're relying on, okay, it's an insurance policy. What is an insurance policy for? In case it's not about now, what's happening now. That's why I said in the beginning, delaying of life. That's what a wrong view is all about. That's why they have nothing to do with the sixth sense doors being examined at the point of arising. That's why we practice sati, sampajanya. Tanhakaya dimuttasam, asammohancha chetaso, disva ayatanupadang samma chittang vimucchati. Buddha says. Actually, that was Sona, Venerable Sona, saying at the moment of his awakening. He says, for the person who is set on removing craving with its constant thirst for more, to remove and tear up the veil, to destroy the veil of delusion from the heart, by standing and looking and observing the very arising of each of the 6 sense doors, suddenly the heart becomes fully released. There's nowhere else that to take place. No Buddha is waiting for you, some realm for you to go and say, I give you Nibbana. There's no future life where that will happen. It's here, by your observation of life as it is taking place through the 6 senses, as you're watching carefully the contact that's happening, boom, boom, the arising, boom, boom, as much as you can. That's why it's a practice. Anupubba sikha, anupubba kiriya. It's a progressive, gradual process. It doesn't require you to have a membership somewhere. It requires your full attention, though. And we're going to fall. We're going to fail at times. We're not going to be able to maintain sati. Out of 100,000 times of putting your attention in, you might be able to hit it a few times, but those few times will turn into hundreds and then into thousands. And then you will not be able to not see the arising of contact at each of these sense doors. This then, bhikkhus, is the fourth of 4 premises or frames of reference that some recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins use to point out the partly eternal and partly non-eternal nature of existence, upon which they rely as their source or frame of reference. Hence, these 4 are used by the Brahmins as premises of their claim that the self and existence are somewhat or quasi-eternal. Therefore, whatever recluses, religious practitioners, or Brahmins who assert and believe in the premise that existence as such is eternal, along with the self with which they identify as they point out the quasi or partially eternal nature of existence, they all would be using or relying on one or another of these 4 premises as their sources or frames of reference. That is so because outside of these 4 frames of reference, there can be none. After all, this itself is the understanding of the Tathagata, who clearly knows and sees that if anyone attaches oneself to and identifies with any one of these premises, it still leads one back into yet another birth. For it surely keeps one trapped within the cyclical becomings of samsara, and without any hopes for an escape beyond it at all. Now, the Tathagata is truly the one who finally came to clearly understand this for what it really is, as well as directly know and see the very escape from this. As such, there can be no confusion or uncertainty whatsoever in the Tathagata as it relates to his understanding of this truth, which is why he has indeed quenched his thirst and attained to extinction. There's no conjecture here. There's no assumption here. There is no guesswork taking place here. None. Thus, by fully comprehending the whole process of arising, of falling away, and of disappearing, of the constant pursuit of gratification, the dangers that it brings, and especially the very escape from all kinds of feelings, the Tathagata has truly attained to ultimate freedom by entirely giving up all grabbing with its tenacious tendency to hold on. Therefore, bhikkhus, these are the teachings, the ways of understanding reality, which are extremely deep, truly difficult to comprehend, let alone to penetrate and come to see or appreciate their depth and scope, for they are indeed excellent, so sublimely peaceful beyond anything the mind could conjure up, utterly transcending the confines of logic. In fact, they are so beautiful in their subtlety that they can only be realized by the wise, that are few. Now, this itself is what the Tathagata has himself revealed, having realized it through his own direct experiencing and penetrative insight. And he now shares it by introducing and making it known throughout. To this end, anyone who truly and sincerely wishes to pay homage by praising the Tathagata, venerating and offering him accolades properly, would be doing so rightfully, while considering and basing his reverence upon these irrefutable facts. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. How beautiful. We'll stop here and continue next week from part 3, wrong views numbers 9 through 12, where there is the wrong view that's called in Pali Antanatavada, existence or the cosmos as being finite or infinite. So either one of those two extremes. So I hope that there is I just read Upatista's message. Let there be light, he says. Indeed, where there is Dhamma, there is light. Absolutely. That's why we're doing this. That's why we take the time, each of us in our own ways, in our busy lives. Some of you, there's different time zones, parts of the world where it's warm, parts of the world where it's cold, where it's colder, right? He said it to me. Yes. Okay, I'll stop here, therefore, and we'll continue from part 3 next week. But are there any thoughts, questions, comments? I hope you're enjoying it as well. Please, it's not a one-time thing. I don't just listen to it, let's say now, and then okay, we're good to go. I'll wait now next week. No, there's even the Buddha says it's deep. To say otherwise would be foolish, to be unfair to the Dhamma. There's so much to gain every time you come back, because when you come back, chances are your mind, some of the dust has cleared off from your eyes, as the Buddha says. It's no longer as thick, as saturated of a cake as it used to be. Thick dust. That's pretty much why the Buddha taught. For those with little dust in their eyes, he says. Encouraged by Brahma Sahampati, who encouraged him, who convinced Lord Buddha to teach. Otherwise, we would be lost. He said that too, Brahma Sahampati, on his knees. And he said, Bhante, long has it been since we have heard the Dhamma being spoken by a living Buddha. Please, because Lord Buddha saw how deep the Dhamma is. And he says, there's no way. These people, they will not understand. They want something to worship. They want some God. They want some blind faith, something. This is not what this is. This is the Dhamma. This is real. And every single person who puts the effort can taste what I have tasted. But it's not easy for people to have the ability to relinquish being a putujana. It's so easy to go and take part in some rituals, to take membership, have a membership, and be going through the motions of a tradition, of a this, going through the routines and say, yeah, I guess I am in this case, a Buddhist. So I should be, right? I think. I take my precepts, I do my donations. I think I'm okay. I do my uposatha every so often, and I'm okay, right? Plus, I come from, let's say, from a lineage or parents, right? So I should be okay, right? Who's running your ship? That's what I began asking, right? Who's manning your ship? Who's at the helm of your life? What views are you functioning with? while life is happening? Is there a delay still? Are you delaying tasting life? And you taste life, not the way the world understands it, but by the presence that you have, to be curious to see the arising at each of the contact doors. If you see something, know that you're seeing it. Not tell yourself, I guess I'm knowing, right? Yeah, this is, am I knowing? Yes, I'm. No, you know already. If you stub your toe, if you hit your head, it's immediate. You don't need convincing. But can you know the moment it occurs and what happened in your mind? When you fall from a horse, are you aware at that moment of impact? Or if the horse gets startled and afraid and doesn't know what to do and accidentally stomps or touches or just lands, steps on you, are there feelings involved? Or are you feeling really the sensations of touch, maybe even pain, maybe even excruciating pain? At that moment, that requires steadiness of mind. That requires pure, genuine sati on your part, where you don't go, yeah, but this is supposed to be painful, and then immediately switch over to, this is painful. That's it. You're gone. You're disconnected from the moment. You're now in the past or in the future. What will I say this? What will do I have insurance? Am I going to be covered? Oh, I was going to wear a shirt. Now I can't because there's a big horseshoe print on my chest, for example. I don't have headache medicine. What am I? You're gone. Versus feeling the way your head is touching the ground. All this, there's millions of pieces of information coming in. You're not being asked or instructed to go ahead and notice every single one. That is impossible. Really, it's impossible. But what is possible is for you to look at the loudest sensation coming in. Sometimes it's going to be your ears. Your ears will tell you you have an eardrum. If there's a powerful wind outside and it keeps waking you up, if there's some wind chime outside that's splashing around because there's like a typhoon level storm going on outside, keeps you awake, instead of fighting with the whole scene and saying, I need to get some sleep, and it's already 3 a.m., I need to sleep, I haven't slept a wink. That's one way of dealing with it, but that's not the Buddha's way of dealing with it, which means the person is lost in emotions, in papanchas, in mental conjurings, proliferations, versus seeing the wind chime, reminding you that you have an eardrum, that you have ears. When you have a terrible body ache or a terrible itch, instead of saying, why did this happen? I should find the right ointment. I have to get rid of this, which is what the Putujana does, versus this skin rash is connecting me. Right now, I am seeing the contact happen. This itch is helping me to see the body, to be present to what's happening to the body. And then you notice the mind come in. The mind says, yeah, but why does this happen? Because this happened, 10 months ago, this already. You're lost in the story. Instead of doing that, see what triggered. What was it? A thought came in. A sanya, that is an object for the mind, just like the itch was for the body. Just like the sound of the wind with the wind chime was with the ear. So similarly with the mind, ideas come instead of us running with what had just happened and making stories, which is what we normally do. Look at the thought itself. Usually it's going to be very fast, but we're training the mind to become even faster in catching. When I say mind, I mean mindfulness, to observe the thought, the idea, the sensation, mental sensation here, when it first starts. And when you do this, your life is all about then ongoing retreat. And that's the only place where you really will feel peace, because it's going to come through your own work, not because of your reliance on a higher power that you beseech and get on your knees and pray to every so often to get something, some goodies to fix your problems. No. That's why there's the sovereignty of oneself through practice, through understanding, through wisdom, which this path provides. So I will stop here. And if there are still no comments, questions, okay, let's transfer some merits. Akasatha ca bhumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam. Akasatha ca bhumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha ca bhumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mamparanti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May the blessings of the Triple Gem be with you all, and may your practice continuously grow. May your heart become lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. And may your mind and understanding of life and the world, existence, through the Dhamma, expand exponentially. The Dhamma is not about someone else attaining. This is about you attaining. You have come, you have gone through so much to take human birth. So much effort. It's a project. It's a process that took you many lifetimes to finally come to human birth. So we cannot take it lightly, what it means, especially now, and your aspirations that you have made to be born at a time where the Dhamma is available. So this is not the first time you're encountering the Dhamma, by the way. Individually, you have come across it, because that's where the spark was in you, the intention, the desire, the longing to break free. And that's why you're here. So may you go all the way, nonstop, and get back onto the helm of your ship. Dhamma is there to guide you. Sukhi hotu, until next time. Be well.